What's up, everybody? You are listening to this week's episode of Specialty Programming on WIUX LP Bloomington. We have another extremely special episode for you today. We have 5 beautiful, lovely members of the LGBTQ community here at IU, and we're just going to sit down and have an open and honest discussion about what it means to be LGBTQ plus here at IU. So to start off, I want to have everybody introduce themselves, your name, your major, your year, your pronouns, your sexuality, your gender, right to the good stuff, all right? So whoever wants to start it off, go ahead.
So my name is Jadelle Rundon. I go by she, hers. I'm studying media management, industry, and policy. I'm a junior, and I'm bisexual.
Right on.
Cool. I'm Sammy. I go by they, them, or she, her. I am currently not studying anything. I would be a sophomore right now if I was going to school. And what was the last one? Oh, I am bisexual as well.
My name is Isaac Garcia. He, him are my preferred pronouns. I'm studying media advertising. And I'm a sophomore. I almost forgot that.
Perfect.
Oh, and I'm gay.
Sorry, forgot the important part.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Autumn Pryor. I'm a junior studying sociology. I use she, her, or they, them pronouns, and I am a gay trans woman.
Hi, I'm Nick Comer.
Nick's bending over like 3 feet right now. He's so tall.
I'm Nick Comer. I study media, like creative advertising as well. I go by he, him, and I am bisexual. I'm a sophomore also.
I felt like giving a round of applause after everyone introduced themselves. Thank you guys. That was fantastic. Great job. Great delivery. So I wanted to start off with just some more general questions and then kind of go into specifics for everyone's individual experiences. But we're growing up in a really interesting time with LGBTQ+. And one of the things that I think is most interesting is the expanding vocabulary of terms related to gender identity and sexuality. So I have a question. How has the expanding vocabulary of terms in relation to gender identity and sexuality affected your identity and allowed you to express yourself? And this is just open and anyone can take it away. Or no one can take it away.
I guess I can start. Growing up, being raised, assigned male at birth, in a fairly conservative community, most of the exposure to LGBTQ was like just either you're gay or straight. And there wasn't ever really any discussion of gender identity or more fluid sexualities or, non-binary identities. And so as, coming to IU where it's a lot more open and there's just more inclusivity, being exposed to those kinds of things really helped me personally figure out like who I was, and just kind of learning what all of those terms meant was just really helpful in discovering my own identity.
Beautiful.
Totally,
Same experience?
Oh, I apologize.
No, go ahead.
for it.
Oh, okay. So to totally go off of what Autumn had just said, is that I came from like a conservative town, like 6,000 people is like max. And so it was like you're gay or you're straight basically. And then I moved to New York to study for a while after high school. And well, back in high school, I never really saw so much of a problem because I am bi, so I was dating women, that there are always rumors about me being gay. And but there was always like that, why am I so unhappy? Like, what's holding me back from that? So I think I'd followed that unhappiness to New York, and then I just went on a date with a guy that I got along with really well, because why not? And we held hands in the back of a taxi, and my heart started to race, and I was like, okay, this is normal for me to feel both ways, and I had the capacity to love everyone. So that expansion for me, coming from a place where it was very just like straight, gay, black or white, that kind of thing, was very, very liberating for me and allowed me to find that little bit more happiness and comfort in myself.
That was adorable.
That was so adorable. So that was kind of a moment of realization for you. How was growing up with your gender identities and sexualities? How did you sort of come to understand who you were? Were there any moments that stood out to you in your youth that were like, oh, I understand myself better now?
Well, I guess I have a little bit of different experience than some of the people here. So I was born and raised in Bloomington, which is a more inclusive town than out of a lot of the other.
She liberal.
India, exactly. We love white liberalism. Right. So I feel like I've always identified as bisexual, and so like I feel like just like growing up in this town, like learning more and more, like deep diving into the queer culture and knowing that like gay and straight are on a spectrum themselves, and like even like learning more about like biology and how like your actual like sex can be on a spectrum as well. Not anyone's anythings are the same as somebody else's, and so just like, you know, love all and whatnot.
Right on.
Yeah. I think my experience was a little different because I went to like a really conservative Catholic school like when I was much younger.
Same.
And
Same.
yeah, going through that, it's just like, you know, the kids would like make fun of me and call me gay before I even like knew what I was. Like they just assumed right off the bat. And so I think it was like 7th grade. I remember there was a boy in an older grade, and I don't know, I got like feelings, and I was just like, this feels like kind of wrong. Like, what is this? I don't know. Sexual awakening, who knows? It's, something went off. And I was like, I knew that I liked boys, but then, you know, because of heteronormativity, I also thought like, but I still like girls, right?
Right.
And so I identified as bisexual until like my sophomore year of high school, and then I just was like, I'm not really attracted to women like that. Like, it's only men. And so I like changed things a lot because I was lucky enough to go to a school that was very open with people's sexualities and like preferred pronouns, and so I was able to like explore that a little bit more, and so I think that definitely helped with like coming towards acceptance of who I am.
Yeah, and I had like a really interesting like way of coming about my like learning about my sexuality. Like I kind of thought that I was just kind of like gay, straight up lesbian, like most of my high school experience. And it wasn't until college that I realized I also kind of like had feelings for guys. So that was really interesting because I feel like it's always the other way around. People like think that they are straight and then realize they have feelings for the same gender. But then I kind of was like reverse. But yeah, also with the whole vocabulary thing, I realized like, oh, I don't really have to label myself as like bisexual or like a lesbian. I'm just a person who likes a person.
Going off of that point, so I think there's like two sides to the evolving and expanding vocabulary of labels. It's like, this is great and more inclusive, but also just more of a reason and pressure to have to label myself. So a question is sort of, have these labels been beneficial, or are there areas where you feel like you have to define yourself before you're comfortable for other people to be able to palette who you are?
Yeah, so I find personally labeling to be really limiting for my experience. So I have, I guess I didn't really answer the other questions correctly in the beginning because I identify as just queer. I don't really like, I mean, I do identify as bisexual, and I identify with the bisexual community a lot. But like with my gender and my sexuality, it's just like queer. So that's, yeah, umbrella terms are cool.
Right on. How does your identity play into your daily experience now as a grown-up person who is more aware of all the levels of yourself? Does it play into your daily life?
For me, you know, realizing that I did not identify as a man, you know, growing up, there was this real need to put on like a strong face and kind of look like I was ready to beat the crap out of anybody who came across me just to survive. And so now that I am comfortable in my identity as a woman, you know, I feel so much more comfortable just being like friendly and enthusiastic about things. I've definitely noticed that it has hugely changed the way I interact with other people. And so that it's been really great for me.
Could you dive a little bit more into that front you were talking about?
Yeah, so, you know, I was raised a man. I wouldn't even say I was raised a boy. I was raised to be a man. My dad was a big football player, so I played football for most of my like young life, which, as we all probably know, is a cult of masculinity.
Right.
So I got picked on a lot. For the longest time, I wasn't really sure what was, quote unquote, wrong with me. Because it was very clear to me that I wasn't gay, in the sense that I wasn't really into men. But because of the way, just because of my limited knowledge about that, I was like, okay, so I'm a straight man, but like something's still clearly weird. Gender identity was not anything on my radar at all. And so I think, most other people could kind of tell something was a little off, like, could kind of could catch hints at my queerness, and really took advantage of that. And so the way I coped with that was by working out a lot, getting into fights, and just really putting on that aggressive front to just, push everybody away. And it took me a while to realize that it was, literally killing me. And so, being able to shed that has been, the most freeing thing I've ever experienced. So yeah.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you
That's
so
a
much.
fantastic evolution.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
I feel like I can really relate to a lot of that. In high school, I wasn't necessarily the nicest person all the time, and I like to think that I'm a kind person now, hopefully.
He is.
Oh, thank you. So I was definitely calculating my every single movement, so that way certain people in the hallway wouldn't call me the F slur, and I was calculating my every movement so as to not suggest homosexuality, like make sure everybody's straight. I brought a girl to my homecoming return after I had graduated, and just basically to show her off, which wasn't very nice, to say, hey, I am straight. But so putting up that front of masculinity was super draining, and then being able to be comfortable and open with who I am and allow myself to be a little bit more effeminate, and that does have negative connotations, but I use it here totally positively, is freeing. And I allow myself to be friendly, and I smile a lot when I just walk down the streets, and allow myself to dress as I like, and I love clothes, love clothes. Even in high school, that was somehow I still managed to slide as straight for some people. Not that you can't dress nice and be straight, I'm just saying, right. But I was just over it, all about it.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about bisexuality, because I feel like there's a really big habit of society to erase bisexuality as a orientation. And I just wanted to know your opinions on that, of bisexuality erasure, it seems.
Well, I had kind of an interesting conversation with my mom, because I came out to her as bisexual, and that was she told me that was harder for her to take than me just telling her I was gay. She told me she would have rather told me that I was just a lesbian, instead of knowing that one day I could have a boyfriend, and then if that didn't work out, I could have a girlfriend. And so that was really interesting, because I always thought she had a little bit of homophobia, because my brother's gay, and just the way she kind of, I guess the lack of talking about it kind of led me to believe that. But then I'm not sure really what changed. I don't know if it's meeting my girlfriend for the first time, but I think now we've made huge strides toward it, and now my girlfriend's a huge part of our family. And also when it's just my mom and I, now we talk about boys and girls. So it's now it's been a really awesome 1 year journey of going through that. But I
All
think
in a year?
yeah, it's all
Wow.
happened in a year. I came out to her the end of my freshman year, or maybe it was my sophomore year of college. I can't remember. But yeah, this all happened in a year's time.
That's
Congratulations.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I connect with what you said really hard, because actually I have 2 older brothers and they're both identifying as gay, and so it was like kind of super easy for me to come out, but they still weren't like yay, you know. And I did come out as bisexual as well, and my dad's only response to it was why do you like have a crush on somebody? And I was like maybe, like, I don't know. But yeah, just like just knowing that I mean, you can love anybody for a multitude of reasons. It doesn't have to be what they have in their pants or what they identify gender-wise, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of bi-erasure, biphobia, and just dominant society, period. Like, I've been told I couldn't, like, by a girl that she couldn't date me because I was with a guy.
Wow.
I had been with a guy before, as if that affects my masculinity or whatever you want to determine or, like, define that as. And then, like, for bisexual women, their bisexuality is, like, fetishized and stuff like
Yes.
that.
Yes.
And it's just really unfortunate. It's like seen as like a, I don't know, something that's hot, and rather than just that's who you are as a person.
Right.
And it's super unfortunate. So it hurts. And I think that, I mean, not to call anybody out, but for bisexual men, I think a big reason why they feel invalidated is by a lot of straight women who believe that they can't be with, like, there's a man who can't be straight if they've been with a man before.
Right. Yeah, I feel that. That's cool. I feel like I've had similar experiences, not with like someone being like, oh, I can't date you because of this, but like having valid feelings for both not both genders, but both a male and a female person, and like all genders, but like knowing that you can have a connection with both of those types of people, but also that's the other part that's kind of iffy for me with the term bisexual, is because it does put gender on a binary, and
Right.
that is like not even where I stand. So
Right.
yeah.
I have a question for the ladies, or for the people.
Yeah.
The lovely people.
Feminine types.
For the feminine
Yeah.
types, for the lovely feminine types. Have you ever experienced from men, like, them seeing your sexuality as like a challenge for straight men?
I mean, yeah, of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
Straight men
I
suck.
would yeah.
Yeah. Any stories?
Oh
Any
yeah, a
experience?
couple. There.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Just like party culture in general.
Okay.
Like I had like there was one time I was at a party my freshman year, and like I had met this guy earlier on in the evening, and he had gotten my number, and like he saw me like making out with this girl at a party. And then I noticed like I was getting a bunch of text messages on my phone. So I kind of just like looked at my phone, and it was this guy texting me to stop making out with her and start making out with him.
Oh my god.
And it was just like really cringy.
Straight men are the worst.
That is really cringy.
Yeah.
That's really cringy. So there's obviously like a really toxic culture surrounding gender and the way that people marginalize different people. How do you see your identity and who you are as a person as agency to educate the public, or do you? Do you see your identity as a reason to act and change the world around you and perceptions?
I kind of do from like a different standpoint, because I do, like, I'm half Mexican, and so there's this like idea of machismo that's really prevalent amongst the Latino community. And so like from an earlier on age, it's just like, you know, you have to be a sole provider, you have to like be this type of way, you know, you can't cry, like you just kind of have to deal with it. And for me, it's like, I understand that you don't have to be that way. And so like I look at it as my sexuality being a way of setting an example for other people who identify with those communities and cultures that are very hyper masculinized, as a way to like advocate and essentially just like promote a message that like you are allowed to be yourself. It doesn't matter what history says or what your family even says, like you're your own person at the end of the day. So yeah.
I see this as an opportunity because I understand to an extent. I can never understand what Isaac's going through or what Autumn's going through or anything like that, but I understand what I have gone through, and so it allows me a little bit more leeway regarding empathy. And that makes me want to help others, especially those who are more vulnerable than I and more vulnerable groups. Like, the most shocking statistic I think I've ever heard, and it made me cry because I was in human sexuality class when I heard it, and it was that, like, transgender women of color, their life expectancy is only 35. And so, like, transgender protection, that's something that's important to me, or just like anybody in the community, because being out is saying I'm putting my own safety below my own happiness and being able to help others and those sorts of things. So I feel like I would be silly to not be using this platform that I do kind of have in a way to not help others.
My experience has been, it's been interesting because, you know, for a lot of trans women, you know, in order to, like, be seen by cis society as women, you know, they often really go hyper feminine, you know, lots of makeup, you know, like nails, dresses, and that's nothing I've really, you know, felt comfortable in. You know, I like wearing dresses occasionally, but, you know, I feel much more comfortable dressing kind of like a, you know, butchy kind of lesbian. And so for me, that often ends up being, you know, ending up in misgendering by people. But, you know, it's strange because, like, while I dress kind of, you know, more masculine sometimes, and that ends up me being misgendered, it also means that I'm a lot safer, as I'm not immediately identifiable as a trans woman. Whereas, you know, times when I go out dressing much more feminine, you know, I'm in a lot more danger. You know, I have experienced, you know, street harassment when, you know, going out in dresses or in makeup or whatnot. You know, I've experienced a decent amount of harassment by older lesbians, especially in, like, the gay community, which is really distressing. So, you know, it's a bind, you know, like, either I present in a way that might not be entirely what I identify with in order to be gendered correctly and be seen by cis society as I want to be seen, or I dress more comfortably to myself and, you know, maybe don't get seen the way I want to be seen. And also, you know, I have not had the opportunity to be on hormones yet, which is a big step in being seen as your gender identity. So, you know, that plays a big part in it too. I kind of expect once hormones kind of get in the picture, it'll be more common for, you know, people to see me that way. But yeah, it's just it's a bind that a lot of trans women face when figuring out how they want to present themselves.
Building off of what Autumn said, she brings up the point that she's personally experienced transphobia within the lesbian community, and I think that, like, part of being in the LGBTQIA plus community is that you, in a sense, are united with, like, all the people who are under those different labels, and it's important to understand that, like, as much as you want to promote, like, rights and equality for yourself, you need to do it for all the other people who are within your community. It's almost like it's your responsibility just as much as it is theirs to uplift you. And I think if we become, like, a divided LGBTQ plus community, then it's like, what are we really, like, standing on? Like, how are we gonna get any progress made if we're all the different members of the community and we're not even standing together, you know?
Right. Yeah, I think that's very prevalent in today's, like, LGBT community, and, like, in the past, obviously, too. But yeah, I feel the same way. Like, I am a white, cis-passing, privileged person, and so, like, why wouldn't I use that and my queerness to connect with somebody who I can help and who I can lift up and, like, you know, have society look at in a way that's not violent or, you know, gross. So, yeah.
So, Autumn, you mentioned sort of the generational divide. Where do you think that like grows out of?
Well, a lot of it goes back to second wave feminism. I don't know. This is a very big and complex topic. But back in like the 70s and 60s, most
We love a history lesson.
so way back then there was, so today there's kind of a distinction made between like drag queens and trans women, where drag queens tend to be men who present as feminine, but at a certain point, they're going to take off the makeup and the clothes and they're going to go back to being men, whereas trans women are like full-time women. And of course, these are kind of essentialist, and they aren't going to apply to everybody who identifies with those categories. But I'm speaking generally. Back in like the 60s and 70s, there was less of that distinction. Like for instance, if you look at like Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, who were some of the giants of LGBT activism, through the first brick at the Stonewall riot. They identified as drag queens, and that kind of culture is, very campy. It's often very hyper feminine, and so a lot of like lesbian, feminists who were trying to break down those notions of femininity, justly so, saw that as kind of stereotyping femininity or like making fun of it almost. And so, yeah, it grows out of more of a historical situation, I think, than, really rationally thinking about it. It's a very complex topic that, would take, a whole series of shows to get into. But in like just a general sense, I think that's a lot of what it is.
Thank you so much for sharing about misgendering and your difficulties with harassment. I want to pose the question to everyone on the panel. Feel more than comfortable not to answer. But have you had any experiences similar to Autumn's being who you are? And how do you overcome that sort of situation?
Well, I feel like I've been very lucky in that I haven't really experienced much like harassment or bullying throughout my life, which I unfortunately is not the same for my brother growing up, and that's probably also another generational thing because he's 6 years older than me. So I think like I didn't really start like dating until like I didn't start dating girls, until like I got into college, and when that happened, it wasn't really a big deal to a lot of my friends. It was the biggest like hurdle I wanted to get over was just like telling my mom and like family. So, but I know that's not the case for a lot of people. So like I recognize that I'm lucky in that sense, and also I recognize that probably won't be the case like leaving Bloomington, Indiana, and going to different cities. Probably won't experience the same level of open-mindedness, so I keep that in mind as well.
I mean, I think that like I don't know. I get like a little bit of it from like specifically men. Probably I'm going to assume straight men. Right.
Yeah. Straight.
Yeah, assuming they're straight. But it's usually like party settings or like usually when people's like inhibitions are a little looser, and so they feel comfortable saying things that are a little bit more discriminatory. Gotcha. And I mean, like I remember Halloween this year, I got called like the F slur twice, and the first one like my sister and I, like, she came and she was visiting, and we, like, tracked the dude down, and we, like, pulled him out of the party, and then our friend kicked him out, so that was, like, really cool. And then the second time it happened, we were just, like, walking, like, from that party to my friend's house, and, like, these guys were, like, shouting at us or whatever, and it sounded like they were trying to amp us up, and so, like, one of my friends started, like, you know, getting down and, like, dancing and, like, having a really good time, and then they were like, you know, you bunch of, like, F's. Yeah. And then me and this girl we were with, like, we turned around and we, like, just shouted at them, and, like, I don't know, we don't really, like, roll over and take it. Like, right. I'm definitely somebody who will clap back and, like, kind of stand my ground in those situations. But the cops pulled up and they were like, so you guys can't really shout at them. And then we were just like, oh, hold on, like, you don't know what they said, like, they called us this, like, it affects us a lot deeper than it affects them. And then they were just like, yeah, we're not saying that it's right, but, like, we can't have you having a public disturbance. You just, like, go home. And then I was just like, they're not going to learn, but okay. We left a note on their door the next day, though, so it's fine.
That's amazing.
That's awesome. Did that take any emotional toll on you that night? Or do you think that being able to, in the moment, clap right back kind of healed that?
It doesn't, for me, I think it would be more of an emotional toll if I didn't say anything.
Yeah.
Because knowing that would be out of character for me, like when something is wrong, I make it known that it's wrong. But I do know that for the group of people I was with, there were those of us whose instinct was to like just get away as fast as they could. And for them, it was very emotionally draining just to like hear that. Because like, I mean, we thought we were having fun with these people. Like they were like amping us up or whatever. And then like all of a sudden that came out of nowhere. And it was just like, okay, like where did this come from? And so for like them who just had their fun completely ruined by that, it was definitely like an emotional toll. But
That would like make it so hard to trust, like to just engage in like casual conversations because you don't know if they're going to switch up on you at any moment.
I mean, yeah, so I haven't really had any like outward, I mean, like dudes yell at you from cars all the time. Sorry, I'm really
That was awesome monitoring. Wow. That was so impressive. That was fantastic.
And yeah, you can just be like, you know, go away. But I feel like the either interpersonal stuff, like or like inner community stuff, like what Autumn was talking about, like another queer person being like belittling of you, would be so much harder for me. And also just like on a personal, like if someone walks up to you and is just talking to you, like outwardly a masculine presenting person coming up and talking to me, I don't like that. I don't want to talk to you. I don't know you. And that's when I freeze, and it is a night ruiner for me a little bit, because especially if I'm not with somebody that I know and love and I'm by myself, I'm a very anxious person and I get scared. And even when I'm with somebody that I like, I'm like, we should go. And yeah, like just like usually cis dudes just not picking up on vibes of like stop talking to me is usually worse than someone yelling at me, because it's a little bit more distance, obviously.
It's like they're putting you in a box that you're not. Yeah.
And speaking of putting in a box, like who here relates to a sense of othering through like just like very little conversation? Like the person doesn't even realize they're doing it, but they're doing it. You know?
Othering. I'm not familiar with the term.
It's just like not recognizing you as like the same, like I guess equal or human in a way.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, I like in my like roommate situation, like there's been times where it's like, oh, that's because you're gay, or like things like that, where it's just like they have these like previous assumptions and then they say things and they're not like realizing it, and it is stemming from a place of curiosity to an extent.
Right.
But like even asking certain questions, like you're sometimes just like, okay, like why am I such a science project for you?
Right, yeah.
Right.
I think it's important to distinguish, and you can tell when a question is genuine or if it's like kind of based in slight homophobia, because questions are so important for us to just get across who we are, and so people can begin to have a better understanding, because I think a lot of the hatred comes from, you know, that fear of the unknown. And so if people like your friends or like stuff like that ask you questions and you can tell that they're genuine, I totally like will answer those, even if they do kind of like come off the wrong way. But like I was asked, since you've only been dating men recently, are you just gay and you just don't want to come out all the way? Which I was like, but it's not that. It was from a genuine place, and she was a little intoxicated anyway. So that kind of stuff is welcome for me, like those kind of questions, but not like those othering questions, if that makes sense. I just wanted to like personally make that distinction. But regarding, I don't mean to like flip back, but regarding like fear, I guess, or violence or whatever, I've never experienced outward like violence. It's mostly been like F-slur or like little things. Like I was trying to get into a club one time and this guy told me I had to button up my shirt more because I can't have it all hang out, or else he wouldn't let me in, because, and then there's like women walking in and literally just bras, which is totally awesome. I admire it, but why do I have to button up my shirt because it looks a little maybe effeminate? But one time I was at a house show, and this guy that my friend and I thought was attractive, we were just kind of looking at casually, and he came over to us, and he's like, do you have a problem with me? And he was like trying to fight us. He's like, I'll take you outside, we can fight. And we can't tell him like, no, we just thought you were cute, because then it's gonna, like, the fight's gonna happen. So we're like, no, we're just looking for our friend, go away. And he came back multiple times throughout the night. And I'm not the type of person to like fight for myself. I'll stand up for other people if there's like homophobia going towards them, or something like that. But for me, I'll let it just sort of happen to me. But I called my mom that night, and I have very supportive parents, and I called my mom that night a little shooken up, like crying a little bit. And within 2 days, she's like, you have a package, go check the mail. And it's a taser and pepper spray.
That's fantastic. That's awesome. I love that. So question, growing up, were there any sort of icons or public figures that you identified with that helped you become closer with yourself or anything?
Freddie Mercury.
Freddie Mercury. Elaborate.
Both Virgos.
And this is where we just talk about astrology.
Yeah,
The rest of that one.
Yeah, now it's just the astrology. No, astrology part. That, and obviously I listened to Queen a lot when I was younger. My parents were children of the 80s, or not children. They were not children in the 80s. They grew up in the 80s, whatever. I just really liked the way that he presented and like carried himself, and he identified as bisexual, and I've always just loved that. So
Very cool.
So for me, I find myself very, even still, like I'm a big Charlie XCX fan, but I find myself very empowered by like powerful women, especially if they're like sexually liberated. And so growing up, I think like my first celebrity crush was Britney Spears, but like the one that I like transitioned from Britney Spears into, and then who I still look up to and still like I think helped me a lot, because I used to pretend to be her and like to put on concerts in my room when I was little, is Gwen Stefani, because she was always in No Doubt.
BANANAS.
Yeah. Like with her solo stuff and her like No Doubt stuff, she was always like super feminist, and like even in like the music video Hey Baby, there's Adrienne, her drummer, is in drag, and like she's just very empowering to me, and that was somebody who I looked up to a lot growing up, and I think I can probably attribute a lot of who I am now to her.
Awesome.
I really looked up to Ellen growing up, just because, like, first of all, just because she's super funny, and, like, people loved her just for her sense of humor, and, like, at least the time I started viewing Ellen, it really wasn't that much about her sexuality. I know that wasn't the case, like, 20 years ago, but, like, when I started watching her, it was just, like, how funny and kind of a person she is, and who also happens to be married to a woman, so I always really looked up to that.
Not so much early childhood, but I remember like in high school. So like I always had been a fan of Ellen Page. My parents were like, my mom is pretty folky, and so like, you know, it starts with Juno, and then it's just like it's downward spiral from there. But I remember that one day I was on YouTube and she came out, and it was like during her coming out speech, and like I watched it, and I just like I got really emotional about it, and I like started crying, and like. Then I was in like an English course where we had to do a declamation speech, and so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna come out to my school, and I did her speech.
Stop.
What year was that?
That was my sophomore year of high school.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And to this day, like I remember doing it, and like I don't know how like I just swallowed it down, and I went up there and was just like, all right, well, this is happening, so we're just gonna do it.
I'm gay.
And I remember like she was like, so what is your piece that you're doing? And I was like, I'm doing Ellen Page's coming out speech, and she was just like, oh, and I was just like, I feel like I kind of relate to it, and she was just like, okay, and I was just like, if that didn't give you a clue of what was about to happen, like, I don't know what was going to. And so I did it, and I remember there was like a moment of silence afterwards, and everybody started clapping, and then I was just like, that was hard. All right, I'm gonna sit down.
How many people in your school? How many people in the audience?
I mean, like, my school, I think, it's a small school. I think there's like maybe like 400 max or something.
Wow.
So the class is only 30 kids, but like, because it's a small school, people talk. you know.
Had you come out to anyone before the speech?
I mean, so I wasn't out to my mom. I actually came out to my mom after I came out to my school.
Okay, that's me. I think that's the flow.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, like, I had the realization with my friends over the summer or whatever, and, like, I, like, told them, like, my close girlfriends, but, like, I didn't really, like, talk about it other than that. And so, yeah, that was just my big, like, all right, so this is me, like...
That's
all y'all
such a
know.
great story. That's such a great story.
I
That's so
love that
cool.
so much.
Very, very, very cool.
Since I only started really like discovering my identity like in my 20s, I didn't really like my heroes now are like Sophie, the producer, like artist, Laura Jane Grace from Against Me. But I think like looking back, like my icon, and I feel like I share this with a lot of like bi and gay women was Shigo from Kim Possible. Anybody
Oh.
else?
That's so awesome.
Yeah, just the whole, just
She's
the
so
energy.
hot.
Yeah, you know. Yeah. So yeah, that was it for me.
Very cool. Well, I love
respect
that.
Wow.
That's
I really
awesome.
love that. Okay, so drawing it a little bit more local to IU, how do you feel about IU's LGBTQ plus community? Do you feel like it's strong? Do you feel like you're a part of it? And what would you like to see? How would you like to see it evolve?
I think it's prominent, and I do think there is, like, it's pretty expansive. In my personal experience, and, like, you guys are free to disagree, I don't think it is as united as it could be. I think that it is quite divided. I think, I mean, at least from my experiences being, like, a gay man in the community, there is a lot of division and prejudices that are, like, built in within that. And I feel like a lot of times it gets caught up in, like, cattiness and drama. And I think it's, like, we grew up in an age where we saw that a lot on television and everything, so we think that that's, like, the norm. And a little bit is, like, discomfort with our sexuality. And so you just are so used to being, like, under ridicule for that, like, you don't even know how to relate to other people who are of your sexuality to an extent. So there's, like, this almost front that this person doesn't like me, or this, like, front that you have to be defensive. And that's my personal experience. You guys are, once again, free to disagree, like, absolutely. But I think that a sense of unity needs to be seen as we go forward.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up here, so I feel like I'm pretty well versed in the Bloomington LGBTQ community, and I agree with what Isaac just said, that it is pretty divided at some points, especially just like, just like cis white gay men, just like being like taking up a lot of space in the community, when like I, again, like being a cis passing white person, am like very for like this space needs to be for everybody, and you're making it so it's not for everybody, and that's not good. And yeah, I have a lot of grievances and whatnots with the queer community here. So yeah.
Well, coming into IU, like one thing I really enjoyed was that I got to meet a bunch of like people who are in the LGBTQ community, because like I felt like growing up all of my friends were straight, and then I was like their token gay friend. So that was really cool, like coming to IU and just like meeting new friends, and then like bringing up like, oh yeah, I also like women, and then they would be like, if it was a girl, same, or like, or whatever, like, you know, they were all, I was like, oh, that's so cool. So like a lot of my friends right now are all like gay, they're all bi, or somewhere on the spectrum, which is really cool. So I feel like I mainly just hang out with my close-knit friends, so like I don't really know what it's like for like the other LGBTQ people, but if there's a divide, I would love to help unite it as well. But yeah.
Okay, so going off of Isaac and Sam's comment, what pressures do you feel from LGBTQ plus people here? Pressures from people who identify the same as you? Do you feel pressures to be a certain way from those who are like you?
Mask for mask. Yeah, I was gonna say that's like a big thing. I don't know.
You have a bit more experience.
Yeah, within like the gay community, I think that there is this big like push for like masculinity and like femininity, and it's like kind of a divide. Like you know, you have half the community being like, you know, like, you can still like be masculine, which you can, but you shouldn't shame the people who are not like masculine, who identify as gay as well. And that's just not how it is currently. And I don't know, like, I mean, not to like touch on like the white gay thing, but to touch on it, I mean, like, I don't know. I think that like I definitely get treated a little bit different as like an ethnically ambiguous gay man than like a lot of the white gay men who are already in the community. And like, I don't know, it is a weird state of like double jeopardy because you're inheriting both like the grievances of being like gay and of being ethnically ambiguous, which is just like a weird gray area in itself. But like, I don't know, I feel like I have to work twice as hard to make gay friends. A lot of people will tell me like, oh, I thought you were like aggressive or mean, like without even talking to you, or like I thought you didn't like me, and I'm just like, I'm sorry. Like, I promise you I do. I'm just like, I'm like a total cheese ball. Like, I promise. My face is just kind of stuck a certain way. So like maybe that was it. Yeah. So I do think that there, like, once again, it goes back to that like predisposition of like just assuming that the other person doesn't necessarily like you or relate to you. And the thing is, we do all exist in a difference that we should be able to relate to.
Right. And it's also like you're not going to be everybody's cup of tea. So like chill out, you know? But also, okay, so like to talk about like your question, I lived in Collins, and that is like the gay dorm, right? And it's kind of transphobic. It's kind of like anti, like, what was it? There was like just some anti-capitalism stuff that happened around Collins, and they like heavily brought it down, and it was like, okay guys, like it was just like they're just very performative liberals, like to me is how I can encapsulate it. And that's how I feel a lot about like I use like LGBT community, but like the actual community in itself, like in Bloomington, I feel like is like super diverse and like has wonderful people, and like you know, I have amazing friends here, and people that I've, you know, loved and grown with, and so yeah, it's just like in the white cis gay community there is a lot of that inherent toxic masculinity that is going to be there, and like I just learned to just not go to those parties. So just not hang out with those type of people, which like, yeah, and like a lot of and those people in those communities find me to be like, you know, the, you know, feminist man hater and stuff like that. And so it's just like, well, then I guess I won't hang out with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like kind of piggybacking off of that, I think like a lot of it is like because we're in this like new community where it's like there is more of us around, there is this need to like assert yourself into like a hierarchical position or a position of power or of
Back
a higher
to the
status.
like performative aspect. I completely understand.
And it's like you don't need to be like, it's not necessarily it shouldn't be like a status symbol. Like your community should unite, not necessarily have to assert dominance over another person, like based off of your Twitter followers or like, oh, I can take pictures of myself shirtless and get like a lot of likes, you know, like just like very, what's the word I'm looking for?
Surface level,
vapid, like
Performative,
superficial. Like there is a deeper cause that comes with like being us, and it's not just to promote our own self-welfare, I guess.
Right.
Let's quote that and put that on a poster. That was beautiful.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Autumn or Nick, any feelings?
Well, I'm a transfer student, and I'm also like, just again, like I kind of discovered my identity kind of late, so I don't have as much experience with like the IU LGBT community. In Greater Bloomington, there is, I feel, a bit more acceptance. I mostly hang out with like, you know, townies, I guess, or people who have already graduated. But like, I have definitely felt some of the things that Sam and Isaac said. but especially with the transphobia among the gay community. Yeah, I don't really know how to characterize it, but it's almost like a mistrust. Like,
Okay.
as, you know, I see a lot of, you know, I experienced a lot of when I was first kind of exploring my identity, you know, I would hear things like, oh, you know, you think like a septum piercing and painting your nails like makes you, you know, not toxically masculine. Like you're still a cis man. And it was like I'm trying. Like I don't know what it's like. I was never good enough, you know. It's like
Like you have to be this certain thing to be a trans woman.
yeah, exactly.
Womanhood is everything.
Exactly. You know, I don't necessarily even believe there is a static concept of womanhood, which gets into the whole like gender abolition, non-binary stuff. But yeah, so I definitely like what y'all said definitely resonated with me, even if I haven't had as much like direct experience with the IU LGBTQIA community. Also, asexual erasure is super bad here.
Really
I
bad.
I got into a huge argument with a person that I was in a social group with because she was like, asexual people are not LGBTQ. They do not experience the same things as us. And I was like, you literally have no idea what you're talking about.
Right.
So, yeah, I think for like the L's, the G's, and the B's, there's a very like established like social role, and you know it's very easy to kind of get comfortable in that role. You know, even though it is like subordinated to cis society, you know, it's an established role that you can get comfortable in, and so once you kind of get there, there's almost less of a like drive to understand the rest of the spectrum. And so I think like if anybody's listening to this, you know, sorry, that was weird. People are definitely listening to this.
Listen up.
If anybody's listening to this who is like part of like kind of that established gay culture, you know, I would like, you know, just ask that you like continue to educate yourself. Like don't ever get complacent, you know. Yeah.
Never close your
I
school
vibe with
books.
that.
Yeah.
Always keep learning. Nicholas, my love.
Oh, I love you. So I definitely want to go off of what Isaac had said, is that there's definitely a lot of pressure to look a certain way or to act a certain way. I feel like there's a lot of pressure for me to act a little bit more masculine or else I'm not bi, or to date more women or else I'm not bi. But then on top of that, it's your appearance, and I've become so obsessed with my own appearance, and like this is really hard to say, but like I've suffered through an eating disorder, and like I'm currently going through like counseling and stuff for that because I don't feel, you know, good enough for that. And I think there's a lot of vapidity, I don't even know if that's a word, if I said that correctly, within the community, and that does stem from that cattiness that I don't really like. But I'm not very like deep in the community. I think maybe my toes are dipped a little bit, but from what I've experienced, it's kind of not something that I want to vibe with all the time, and it makes me sad because I would love to be surrounded by that community, but there's so many great people out there elsewhere that, I mean, are queer or not queer, either way. Yeah.
So, unfortunately, we only have a little bit of time left. I just want to say thank you all so much for coming on. In the light of labels, I have a challenge for all of you before we end. I would like for each of you to say one word, any word that you love that just describes you as a human being. It's an easy question, huh? It's so easy. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It can just be what comes to mind.
The moon.
Goonie.
Art ho? That's 2 words. Hyphen.
Yeah.
I hyphenate it.
Autonomy.
Oh, that's so good.
I love that one.
You all said such good things, and now I can't think of a single word. Man. Okay, no. No. Like, see, my favorite word is infinitesimal, but that's gonna make me sound like I just think of myself as super tiny, and that's not true. So obviously, so I don't know, Daisy. Yeah.
Lovely. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for being so open and sharing all of your experiences. It's really been great to have you all on.
Thank
Seriously.
you for inviting us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Love you, Eliza.
Come
Doll.
back anytime.
You were-
As always, this has been your specialty programming on Friday. You are listening to WIUX LP Bloomington, and have a beautiful and safe weekend. Peace out.